I decided to go for a jog along the path that connected my small office to my house, which was about 2 miles away. It was a spontaneous run, motivated by frustration with some work materials that were sent to me in a very incomplete state. After about an hour of trying to make sense of it, I slipped out of my jeans and work shirt and into shorts, a t-shirt, and sneakers. I added a pair of sunglasses and a headband and was off. I planned to run to my house to get some paperwork I needed, about 20 pages or so. When I was about half a mile from my house, I noticed a guy about 200 yards ahead. This was a little unusual since this path mainly led to my house and hardly anyone used it. There was a cliff that led to the back of the house, and the guy in front of me cut off this piece, which led nowhere but to a dead end at my back door. I quickened my pace, turned a small corner, and looked at the guy. He was at the back door to the patio of my house. I watched him open the door, which wasn't locked. I stopped to think about what I had seen. I knew that my wife, Lisa, was working from home that day. I ran to the door. It was locked, of course. I had the key and used it. I quietly pulled back the patio door and looked inside. There was no one in the kitchen where Lisa usually worked. Some of her work documents and her laptop were lying on the table. I heard a noise upstairs. Muted. At the entrance from the dining room to the kitchen, I kept a baton, like the ones the police use for protection. It belonged to my grandfather when he was actually a patrol cop. It was protective, but also reminded me of him, the man I adored as a child. I took the baton and crept upstairs. The floorboards were carpeted, so this was not a problem. The door to the master bedroom was closed, and sounds were coming from there. The sounds were muffled, but I assumed they were intimate sounds. I grabbed the door handle, and when it turned, I carefully opened it. Imagine my surprise. The runner's clothes were lying on the floor, and he was just about to climb on top of my wife, my completely naked wife. I walked up to the bed and hit the guy on the butt with the baton, a loud slap. He screamed and grabbed his behind. Lisa looked at me with wide eyes, wide arms, wide legs. She shouted something. I recognized this guy as her boss, Tom Blackwell. He rolled off Lisa and stood up from the bed, holding his behind. "Stop! I was invited," he said. I looked at Lisa. She said absolutely nothing. Tom said, "You better put it back or I'll take it from you and kick your butt." He was bigger than me, older, about 40 or so. I was in my 30s. I heard that he was into martial arts. He seemed so confident as he threatened me, standing there naked with pale skin in my bedroom. I didn't know him very well, and he hardly knew me at all. One thing he didn't know was that I spent a lot of time playing tennis. I had a great backhand. I smiled at him. This seemed to drive him crazy. He roared. I mean, it was a roar like a wild animal. He launched at me from about 6 feet away. I hit him in the face with a backhand. He didn't have time to duck. The baton hit him on the right side of his forehead. I was aiming for the cheek, but he must have tried to duck as he walked toward me, and his head tilted down slightly. That's why the baton hit him on the forehead. He fell like a bag of cement. He didn't even move when I looked down at him. I looked at Lisa. She was in some kind of trance. Her eyes were glassy, and drool was running down her chin. I looked around the room and saw a cell phone on the dresser. It was in an upright position with the screen facing the bed. This son of a bee ***** filmed everything. I picked up the phone, switched it so I could look at the telephone panel, and dialed 911. "What happened to you?" the operator asked. "My name is Jim Davis. I'm at my house at 23 Maple Street. A man was in my house, in my bedroom, and when he attacked me, I hit him. I believe he is seriously injured and needs immediate medical attention. Besides, my wife is here, and I think she's, I don't know, on pills or something. She is conscious, but unresponsive. We have people on the way, sir. If you are armed, please put your weapon down. They will approach your home with caution. Please understand." "I understand. I'll meet them in the front yard." I heard the sirens and went downstairs. I kept the phone with me. The line was open. I put the baton on the sofa. I walked out the front door. I was standing in the middle of the front yard with my arms at my sides when a police car pulled up. An ambulance followed it. There were 2 officers, a man and a woman. They got out of the car but did not take out their pistols. The woman, who seemed to be of higher rank, asked, "Are you Mr. Davis?" "Yes, they are up there. See yourself." I turned and walked back inside, and the officers followed me. I led them to the bedroom door and stepped aside. The door was open. Lisa was lying on the bed. She looked into space. Blackwell didn't move at all from what I could tell. A female officer knelt next to Blackwell and checked his pulse. She told another officer to call paramedics. Then she looked at Lisa. She asked, "Ma'am, are you okay, ma'am?" No answer. The doctors arrived, and I moved away. They worked feverishly on Blackwell. The second group of doctors arrived. The police officer, Sergeant Helen Moore, removed the robe from the closet door, lifted Lisa from the bed, and put on the robe. She led Lisa into the guest bedroom. She looked at me and pointed down. "Go there. Don't leave, but stay out of the way." I went into the kitchen and looked around. I downloaded the video from Blackwell's cell phone onto a small computer I kept in my desk drawer. Then I downloaded the entire contents of the phone into another file. I emailed the video to my office. Then I turned the thing off and left the phone on Lisa's desk. I watched from the kitchen doorway as the ambulance guys carried Blackwell out the front door, loaded him up, and sped off. A policewoman I had never seen before led Lisa into the living room, away from me. Lisa walked, but didn't even look up from her feet. She was wearing a robe and some sneakers. Sergeant Moore entered the kitchen with a plainclothes detective, a thin, older man, John Walker. She introduced him to me. He and I already knew each other. My legal practice was now primarily civil, but I had been doing criminal defense for some time, and Detective Walker and I had a few cases together. I liked him and thought we got along well. "Hello, Jim. I'm sorry this all happened. Do you know the person you hit?" "My wife's boss, Tom Blackwell." "Do you have information about his place of residence? We have his clothes, sports equipment, and credit card, but no ID." "I don't really know him at all, John. Last I heard, he was married and had kids in school. This was maybe a year ago." "Did you have any reason to believe that he and your wife had intimate relations?" "No, not up to this day. I went through everything, from my decision to go for a run, to relieve stress and pick up some paperwork, to calling 911. I didn't really miss anything. I had no reason to do this." "So, did you recognize Blackwell when you were outside?" "No. When he rolled out of bed, that's when I realized who he was." "You hit him on the butt?" "Yeah, I didn't mean to cause any real harm, but I wanted this guy to get away from my wife, no matter what she wanted." "But then you hit him again. Why?" "Like I said, he told me to drop the club or he would take it and beat me with it. Then he roared and rushed at me." "Roared?" "Yes. Now I guess he was trying to scare me. He succeeded. I didn't aim at his forehead. I aimed lower. He must have ducked down or his head dropped lower." "Fine. Well, your wife isn't involved in this. We are testing her for the presence of any active substances. I believe that when she comes to her senses, she will confirm what you said. You know, John, this cell phone belonged to Blackwell. I believe he videotaped the intimate. All the struggle may be there. Why is he down here? I used it to call 911 and then left it open when I went outside to wait." Walker asked a crime scene technician to answer the phone. I asked him what would happen to Lisa. "I'm not sure. Let's go have a look." He, the sergeant, and I entered the living room where Lisa was sitting with a uniformed officer and a medic. Walker asked the doctor, "What's wrong with Mrs. Davis?" "We're going to take her to the county hospital as a precaution because she seems to be in shock. Her vital signs are fine." I looked at Lisa, and at that moment she looked at me. A tear rolled down from her right eye. "I'm so sorry, Jim," she muttered. Then she seemed to fall into a trance again. "Lisa! Lisa!" I called. I was a little pissed when she disconnected again, but she didn't answer. A few minutes later, she was taken away in an ambulance. I changed into the clothes I had in the basement and followed us in our car. The police were in the house, but I was assured that they would lock the house or at least leave someone there. I called Lisa's parents, who lived one state away, about 2 hours away. I gave them the short version and told them I would call from the hospital. Lisa and I got married when she was 21, fresh out of college, where we met. I was 1 year away from graduating from law school. Lisa immediately got a job at Tom Blackwell Insurance Company. It was a large company, and he was one of the 3 owners. She worked her way up steadily from clerk to administrative assistant. She was assigned to Blackwell's department, housing and automobiles. I attended company events with her and never noticed anything between the two. That was the first time I met the Blackwell family. She has now worked for the firm for more than 6 years. I thought our marriage was strong, that is, until today. I had little doubt that the relationship I saw was consensual, so unless he somehow managed to drug her, this would most likely end our marriage. Given the circumstances, I didn't understand how he could drug her. There was no time. I thought she was waiting for him, probably naked, and she left the back door open. I wondered how many times this happened. I loved Lisa. She was pretty, cheerful, and kind. Our intimate life was very good. Even when I was busy, we still found time, at least on weekends. And now that I've largely given up criminal trials, my work has become much more predictable. I didn't understand what I was seeing. Blackwell was a bigger man, but from what I saw today, not bigger where it would make a big difference. But I only took a glance. Who knows? At the hospital, Tom Blackwell's wife was in the emergency room. I recognized her, but she didn't seem to notice me. I left everything as it was and asked about Lisa. They allowed me to return to the compartment where she was. She slept. I looked at her a little. I was lost. I couldn't believe she did this to me, to us. I had a deep need to understand what happened before I made difficult choices. A pretty woman dressed in a white robe entered the small room. "I'm Dr. Martin. Are you her husband?" I nodded. "What's wrong with her?" "She had some kind of mental trauma. She had a shock reaction that made her pass out. She didn't fall into a stupor. When she wakes up, it is very likely that she will come to her senses and become normal." "When will she wake up?" "Maybe 3 to 4 hours, depending on the dose we gave her." "Thank you. I'll be there, I believe." "Fine." She was about to leave, but I stopped her. "What about Tom Blackwell? How is he?" "Are you related?" "No, just an acquaintance." "Well, I shouldn't, but he's in a coma, medication-induced. He has a very serious head injury." She left. I thought about Blackwell. I believed I killed him, and now maybe not. I called Lisa's parents and reported what I had been told. They decided to come to us, but I talked them out of it. I told them that Lisa most likely had an affair with her boss and that she and I needed to discuss it. Her mother, Joanne, said, "I've been thinking about her for the last few months. She seemed different, worried. Please give her a chance to explain everything, Jim." "Oh, I'll do that, I promise. It doesn't seem to do any good, though. Well, just see." I was looking for Mrs. Blackwell and found her in the ICU waiting room. I approached her. "Hello, Mrs. Blackwell." "Yes, do you want to say something?" "No, ma'am, I'm Jim Davis. My wife, Lisa, works at your husband's company. It seems they were together." She was quite tall, slender, brown-haired, in her early 30s. She asked, "Together?" "Yes, they were naked in my bedroom when I came home this morning. This kind of intimacy." "Ah, you're the guy who hit him?" "Yes, sorry, I'm not sorry." "Okay, Simon has been strange lately. This got me thinking. He didn't play children's sports like he used to. He claimed that he was busy at work. I think he was busy with your wife." "I don't know that for sure, except for today. But they, of course, quickly got down to business like they had a routine." "What did the doctors tell you about how he was doing?" "They said neither one nor the other, although he may have surgery soon." "Well, good luck to you. Will you take your children?" "They are with my parents. They know he's in the hospital. Nothing special anymore." I went outside to get some fresh air and maybe clear my head a little. I decided not to make any decisions until I heard from Lisa. I stood there for an hour and went back inside. Lisa was in the same room of the emergency room behind a curtain. I walked in on her and she stirred, but was still sleeping. I sat down in a chair and dozed off. I woke up when she started making sounds. Her eyes flew open. She looked at me and closed them again. She started to make a sound. I went for help. Dr. Martin was at the nurse's station, and I waved to her. She quickly approached. She seems to be waking up, although I'm not sure if I should be there when she does. She saw me and just passed out again. "Wait here." She entered. I could hear but not see. "How are you, Lisa? Can you tell me?" Lisa answered her in a weak voice. "Oh God, I'm sorry. Lisa, we need you to be fully awake. You need to accept the situation, whatever it is, and move forward. Detachment simply cannot last long. I'm going to let you go this afternoon, maybe in 2 hours." "Fine. Where's Jim? He was here when I first woke up." "He thought you would have reacted better if he wasn't here, although he is somewhere nearby." I wonder how long this will last. I screwed up big time. What about Tom? Is he okay?" "Jim hit him. We don't know if he'll be okay or not. He'll probably have to have surgery." "Damn. Well, I told him not to be so adventurous. It was a bad risk. He lost. I bet I do too." "Maybe you should talk to Jim." "I'm sure I can find him. Or maybe I can wait until you get home." I opened the curtain and went inside. "Lisa, I'll take you home, I hope soon after that." "Okay, thank you. I'm really sorry. We will talk." I turned to Dr. Martin. "When can we leave?" "Now. I'll start filling out the paperwork. We'll give her some medical clothes." She left. Lisa said, I'm so sorry, Jim. Sorry, Jim. Sorry." "It's just not a big deal. You have to understand when we get home." Dr. Martin brought her a medical form. I left the stall while she was changing. She seemed to take this as a refusal, and so it was. I had no desire to see her naked, maybe never again. They put her in a wheelchair as I pulled the car to the exit. She got up and got into the car. We didn't speak for the 10-minute drive. Her tears flowed, but she did not cry. I opened the front door and we walked into what was our happy home. There were no police there. There wasn't even much clutter downstairs. Lisa sat down in the rocking chair in the living room. "I'm going to check upstairs. I'll be right back." I ran up. It was a complete mess up there. In our bedroom there was a piece of carpet cut out that Blackwell fell on. I guess I will do some research. The bed was stripped down to the mattress. The drawers were pulled out but not fully closed. I decided to tidy it up later. The other rooms were fine, except that there were traces of fingerprint powder in the bathroom. I wasn't really looking forward to talking to Lisa. I called her parents and told them she was home. They breathed a sigh of relief, but wanted to know if they should come. I didn't know what to say. I gritted my teeth and went downstairs. "Do you want something, coffee, water?" Lisa looked at me when I asked. "No, nothing." I sat down opposite her on the sofa. We sat facing each other about 6 feet apart. "What happened, Lisa? I thought we were fine." "It's hard to explain, Jim. I've worked for Tom all these years. I've always liked him, not, romantically, but in the last month or so, he started flirting. He made little comments about how good I looked. Sometimes he touched me on my arm or shoulder. I was surprised. Then he invited me to lunch, just us, he said. But didn't you think about all this? This big change in attitude? Didn't you think it was strange? Maybe a little bit." She looked down. I was flattered, and he's quite attractive. I found myself interested. It took me a while to admit this. "So you knew that he was trying to seduce you, and what did you decide?" "See what happens." She put her head in her hands, but she raised her eyes again. "And what?" At this point, I was sure we were screwed because it wasn't a case of her being tricked or drugged. She wanted this. "And we went to dinner. I asked him why he was doing this now, after all this time. He said that he always wanted me from the very beginning, but suppressed this desire. This was his phrase. Lisa, why? What's wrong with me that you were open to him?" "You're okay, Jim. He said he wanted me so much. He said he wants me much more than you. I was old hat to you, new for him, exciting. Just the thought made me horny. Why didn't you talk to me about this? What would I say? Say that I'm thinking about cheating for more excitement? I never thought about it." "How many times have you had intimate, Lisa?" "Not once. Today was supposed to be the one and only day, but you showed up. I was scared when I saw you. You just looked at me with such contempt, not even hatred or anger exactly. The same as at first, a quick glance, and then you hit him with the baton." I thought when she said that, the cops should have talked to her first, then I had to do it. He rushed at me. I saw, but it was so quick and final. Lisa, I don't believe you about this being the first time. I saw him coming through the back door. The door was not locked, and it didn't take me long to get inside and upstairs. But you were both naked, and he was about to have you. You wanted this too, so I think you've done this before. No, Jim. Tom and I kissed in his car 2 days ago. We felt each other out, but I didn't let him go further. I told him that he can come to our house after you leave for work. All this seems so unlikely. Think if you saw what I saw, what would you believe? Oh, you have to believe me, or maybe not. I just don't know how to get you to accept what I'm saying. And now, I will never be able to accept what you say. What should I do, Jim? I love you. I don't like Tom. He made me want him. How? He is so strong. He says what he wants. He wanted me. And you obviously wanted him, Lisa. I want to really think about this right now. If I decided to do anything now, we would be heading towards divorce. I can never forget what I saw. Fine, but please remember I love you. I'm so sorry you're hurting. She blurted it out while sobbing. I turned and left. I went upstairs to our home office. I started looking through material from Blackwell's phone. Lisa's phone had been receiving quite a few calls since about 2 months ago. The calls always came in the evening. He wouldn't have to call at work. There were also texts. They always talked about lunch. They seemed to go to lunch together about twice a week for 5 weeks. Since Lisa worked from home 3 days a week, this meant that every day she went to work, she had lunch with Blackwell. I decided to watch his video. It all started when he followed Lisa up the stairs. She was wearing a short robe. She entered the bedroom and immediately threw him onto the floor. The video wavered for a second as he placed the phone on the dresser and pointed it towards the bed. You are beautiful, Lisa. Exactly as I always imagined. He jumped on the bed and then I opened the door and hit him. The sound on the video was great. You could hear a loud slap and his scream. I watched it all the way until I picked up the phone to call 911. Based on the video, I wasn't sure if Lisa was telling the truth about it being the first time. Maybe. But of course she was looking forward to her intimacy with Blackwell. Maybe it would only be one time, like she said, but I doubted it. He was her boss. I went into the living room and told Lisa that I needed to go back to work to close the office. By that time, it was already past 3 in the afternoon. I jogged back. Now I really didn't care how Lisa felt. I felt less overwhelmed and more angry than before. I shut down what I was doing when I went for a run. I looked up the divorce laws in our state. Adultery was a ground for divorce, although it was not often used. There was no fault in this. This could be done after 6 months of separation if a separation and property agreement were signed. But if one party didn't sign the contract, it would take much longer, maybe 18 months. Jim wasn't sure if he wanted to divorce Lisa, but he was sure he wanted separation. He drew up an agreement. It basically said that they would separate, live in different places, and split their finances. She will provide for herself, and he will be responsible for himself. There will be no intimate contact between them. In addition, what is most interesting, each promised not to have a night with other people. If one did this, it would free the other, and the divorce would take place as quickly as possible. I printed 3 copies. I walked home. Lisa was preparing dinner. There wasn't much. Spaghetti with meat sauce and salad. She was wearing a tracksuit and no makeup. Barefoot, she looked at me timidly. I said, "It smells good." "Thank you. Can I help?" "I can handle it, but if you want carrots for your salad, they're in the refrigerator." I chopped up some carrots and threw them into a bowl. We ate in relative silence. There was red wine, and they both had a glass. We washed the dishes together. "Let's go to the living room and talk." I saw that Lisa was scared. I followed her inside. Lisa spoke in a quiet voice. "Jim, I want to say again how sorry I am. I want to try to understand how I could have been so wrong. I decided that I needed to see someone. Everything is fine, but now I think we need to break up. I'll find an apartment nearby. You can stay here. I don't feel comfortable staying here now." Are you sure? I feel so guilty. Do you want to get a divorce? So, shall we part? This is a step towards this, but I haven't decided yet. I just decided I needed some space to think. I wrote a separation agreement. I handed it to Lisa. She read it to the end with tears in her eyes, silent tears. I've already signed it. She looked up at me. Can we wait a few days to do this so I can arrange for my mom to come here? Well, I can wait a little. Agree on it. Why don't you do it and tell me? Jim, I meant what I said. I'm going to counseling. Maybe you can come if the consultant asks. Maybe. I really love you, Lisa, but I'm confused and very, very angry. It feels like I'll never be the same as I was. Me too, but you did it. Who I thought you were not. The point is that you got caught, but you are the same person. You're just not who I thought you were, not the woman I loved. Then she burst into tears. I didn't make the slightest move to console her. The woman I loved would never do this. You are not her. Maybe you're basically her, maybe not. I feel like our whole life together has been a sham. The only question is, how much of a sham is this? I went upstairs. I grabbed my belongings from the master bedroom, enough to get me through the next day, and moved into the guest room. The next day was a working day. I hardly slept. I got up early, got dressed, and went to work. I went out around 9 a.m. and bought a McMuffin. I was surprised that I was able to work. I sent several emails, copied notes in the judge's office. Then I began to take apart what I had. When I got into it, I forgot about Lisa for a while. Maybe this is how I will have to behave during separation. Over lunch, I looked up apartment rental information. I called one just 2 blocks from work and made an appointment to look at it the next morning, Friday. The day seemed to fly by. When I thought about it, I decided it was an escape mechanism. I started walking home at about 5:30. We rented a 3-bedroom house. The lease expired in 2 months. We lived there for 4 years, and this place began to feel like home to us. But now, it's no longer for me. I walked along the treadmill and entered the sliding back door just like the day before. Lisa was cooking. She had fish stew on the stove. It smelled great. She was a very good cook. I was fine, I greeted her as I walked inside. She looked at me. I cooked fish stew. Yes, I felt it. I smiled at her. Thank you. It'll change now. As we ate the stew, Lisa said, My mother will be here on Saturday. Have you found a place for yourself? Maybe. I'll look at the apartment tomorrow. We can sign the papers tomorrow evening. I won't be there on Saturday anyway. It doesn't have to be this way, Jim. I promise you that this will never happen again. I promise. No, obviously promises can be easily broken, I replied. She looked at me intently. There were no tears. You know, you let your hurt feelings get in the way of common sense. What would be wise for me to do? Ignore your violent infidelity? If it will not happen, you could try. Don't ignore it. Forgive. I apologize. I really have no idea if I can forgive. I know for sure that I will never be able to forget this. What happened, what I saw, the video. I can email you a copy. God, Jim, she began to sob. I didn't mean for it to be cruel, just so you know what I saw. Maybe someday you'll forgive me for being in the way. She ran away. She ran up the stairs. I cleaned everything up. I rented an apartment. It was a studio apartment with a beautiful view of the running track and a small park. It was halfway between work and my former home, but there was no furniture in it. I arranged for a double bed to be delivered, as well as sofas and armchairs. The expenses were painful, but necessary. I wondered if Lisa would have a job in the future or the same one. If not, I'd probably have to increase funding. I sat after lunch thinking about all sorts of things. I decided that it was very unlikely that I would ever return to Lisa. I had a friend who worked at the same company as Lisa Michelle Davis. She and I went to college together and were together before I met Lisa. I kind of left her for Lisa, and she kind of left me for a frat guy. We remained communicating with friends. One of the reasons I chose Lisa was that I thought she was a bit flighty. Her quick hookup with a frat boy seemed to confirm this. She left him as quickly as she started. She went to law school with me and married a fellow student. She had a young son and what seemed like a stable marriage. This shows how good I was at reading people. I called her. Shelley, this is Jim. Damn, Jim, what are you doing? I heard that you froze Blackwell. Not my fault. Self-defense. Jim, I'm free for lunch. Agreed. It was only 2 hours away from here. I met Shelley at a restaurant. We hugged, sat down, and ordered. While we were waiting for lunch, she said, "Well, tell me." I told her. She was a person I trusted. I found that I still trusted her. When I finished my story, she said, "I've heard rumors about Tom Blackwell, that he's gone off the rails and might be getting a divorce. I also heard that Lisa was dating him. I didn't believe it." "Well, what did you hear? What did you see, for example?" "Lunch meetings in the office, everything else was speculation. But Blackwell, I've never seen him so often. Blackwell had to change. It was like he was always looking for someone to sleep with. The girls from the office were beside themselves. So Lisa wasn't the only one. Maybe not, but it seemed she was a prime target. They saw each other every day. No offense, but why didn't you call me?" "I thought about that, but I thought that she wouldn't do anything, and calling you can cause a lot of trouble." "What are you going to do?" "I rented an apartment and wrote a separation agreement. 6 months, you know, but I'm not sure." "I hope you at least listened to her." "What could she say? She has already apologized and said she will never do that again." "So what?" "I think this is a difficult question." "Yes." "How are you and Big Bill and Little Will doing?" "Little Will is great. He is 3 years old, dynamo machine. He starts going to preschool." "Okay, and oh, Jim, you don't need to listen to my problems. Yours are much more serious." "I could use a break from them. I will help if I can, if something is wrong." "Nothing special. He has to travel a lot. Sometimes when he returns home, he is distant, not like before. Now hearing about Lisa, it makes me think, but I just now decided to be proactive." "Shell, what does this mean?" "Maybe check it out a little. He is a good guy. We are family, but I need a little confidence. Just ask him. Talk. You both know how to talk. Figure it out. Tell him how you feel." "I'm worried about this. He may take this to mean that I don't trust him." "And you? Just be gently diplomatic." "Maybe. Thank you. I hope you and Lisa get through this. I was never a friend at school, you know why? But I thought she was good for you after all." We finished lunch, hugged, and left. Shelley was a good woman, and I hoped no harm would come to her. I was told that Lisa had returned to work. I was relieved that she wasn't fired. More and more I came to the conclusion that it was all over between me and Lisa. We were devoted only to each other. We had no children. She broke her part of the obligations, so it was all over. And I didn't believe that I wanted to start all over again with new responsibilities. It was a depressing conclusion, but I felt it was right. I haven't had any contact with Lisa since I moved in that Saturday. A week has already passed. She left 3 messages on my phone asking me to come over and talk. I never answered. She texted me that she was on probation at her job but was still working. I walked past the house the following Saturday afternoon. I just got off the treadmill and knocked on the patio door. Lisa's mother, Tess, was in the kitchen and opened the door when she saw me. "Hello, Tess. Is Lisa around here?" "She went out. She should be back soon, Jim. I mean, she's so confused about this. Maybe have you already decided something?" "I just wanted to talk to Lisa, Tess. Where did she go?" Tess looked a little embarrassed. "She went to her friend." "Tess, you're hiding something. You're bad at it." "Which friend?" "Did she spend the night here or somewhere else?" "Jim, she was in bad condition. A partner came in and they went to have something to eat." "Tess, was this dinner yesterday?" "You can't hide it from me." I noticed that she was positioned to block the door from the kitchen. I walked past her to the front door. A car pulled up, a brand new Mustang. A blond man was driving. He walked out of his door and walked around the car to open the passenger door. Lisa left. She was dressed for a date, for yesterday's date. I ran up to them. "Hello, Lisa, I came to see you." She turned around in shock. The guy looked scared and worried. "Jim, this is James from work. He had you at night." I was calm, but something in my voice must have scared them both. James from work began to back away. "Dude, I don't want any trouble here. I was only trying to help." "Expletive, you got what you wanted. If you stay here a little longer, you will get much more than you bargained for." He was my height and younger. I saw him straighten up, offended. Lisa screamed, "No, no, just stop, James, please leave now." James said, "Whatever you say, Alice. Emphasis on you, dude." He chuckled, quickly walked around his car and drove away. I looked at Lisa. "That's all. You know, you didn't last even a week. The agreement said no intimate. I'm going to refer to this point. I will arrange for you to be served as soon as the papers are ready." "Sorry, Jim. I'm weak, and I needed support, and I knew that you and I broke up. But I love you, even if it doesn't seem like it." "I think you just needed some new intimate to get the thrill you missed last week. What a low you've become. We no longer need to maintain any communication. Hire a lawyer." I walked away, walked around the back of the path, and went home. She made this very simple decision, although I was very surprised. I've been with her for a long time, and none of this crap happened. She was attractive, and men were probably attracted to her often. I wondered why she suddenly started giving in to them. Before returning to my room, I decided that this would forever remain a mystery to me. Or maybe I would ask her mom. I actually had a moment alone with Tess about a week after the last visit. I slipped into the house when Lisa was most likely at work. I knocked on the patio door and Tess let me in. "Why are you here, Jim?" "I wanted to understand what happened, if possible, and I thought you might have some ideas. I mean, we were doing great and then she just went." "Do you have any idea why?" "Maybe she had, I think, problems with self-esteem. She wasn't very attractive to men, boys, throughout most of high school. She had no chest and was skinny. Her two friends filled their bras much faster. They were popular and became cheerleaders. Lisa was far behind them when it came to popularity. Gradually, they moved away from her. But when she turned 17, she changed. She gained some weight in all the right places. There was no more acne on her face. The boys began to pay attention to this. She was 18, and then that summer she went crazy. She worked, but every evening she went out with her friends and boyfriends. I was afraid that she would get pregnant, but she took the pills. I was worried about illness, but as far as I know, this did not happen, I see. But when I met her in college, my freshman year, she didn't seem intimate needy. She always seemed normal to me. However, she was experienced more than me. She told me what she likes and what she wants. I liked it, but she has never strayed since we started dating. Still," Tess paused and asked, "Are you guys were talking about children?" "Yes, we plan to start soon. Now it's all gone." "Well, maybe she was worried that if she got pregnant, men wouldn't like her anymore. I think she contacted her boss because he was stalking her, and she needed some reassurance. This is the best I can guess." "But what about the boy with the Mustang?" "Same reason. A young guy with a luxury car proved that she is still attractive. Before she—" "But she already knew. She knew well that she was unlikely to remain married or give birth to children for me." "Yes, I don't know. Maybe she was just horny." "How long will you stay here?" "Not too long. I wish you a good life, Tess." I left. The divorce went through without any problems. Lisa moved out of our rented apartment and rented an apartment on the other side of town, closer to her work. I had no contact with her after the trial. When we went to file our divorce, Lisa came up in the hall. "Take me to lunch, Jim. Actually, you'll pay. I need to say something." "Fine." We went to Red Lobster. I ate the appetizer and she ate the soup. She looked at me after we ordered. "Jim, I really screwed you up. I went to a psychologist. She says I was afraid of children, but I do not know. I think maybe I'm just a born fallen woman. I really wanted Tom. To me, sorry. I may never understand, Lisa. He's not that big of a catch. What happened to him?" "He didn't die, and I never heard anything more. He returned to work part-time. He has a cane and uses his right hand very little. And his wife divorced him." "Good for her." "I think it was cruel. You really ruined his life, Jim." "Well, you two really ruined my life, but I think not as much as you ruined your own life. By the way, how are you doing?" "I miss you in our life. Now I can have as much intimate as I want with most men I meet, and I really like it. I get really hot and horny when this happens. I have to do something about it. I don't know why this started happening to me again. Tom reminded me of the guy who took me to prom and then took my virginity. Maybe I wanted to go back to those glory days. And now you have them. You can have intimate for your pleasure. Don't be cruel. But she laughed. I really didn't mean for it to be funny, but I understood the humor and laughed with her. She said, "A new man always turns me on." She paused. "Anyway, I really miss you in family life. I haven't found a single guy who is better at intimate than you. Maybe one was just as good. He's bigger, but you and I got to know each other so well. You could always satisfy me very much. I was a fool." I'll admit, I didn't really try to hide it from her, and she noticed. "I see. You still find me attractive, Jim. I am available to you at any time." She started singing this song, "Just say my name, and you know wherever I am, I will come running to see you again." She smiled at me. "Oh, Lisa, God, I was in an ant right then and there." Lisa was the hottest woman alive, at least to me. I wanted her more than any other woman I'd ever met. Our waitress came over with our food. Lisa stood up and threw $30 on the table. She turned to the waitress. "Something has changed. We have to leave right now." I woke up. Lisa and the waitress looked at my crotch at the same time. Lisa blushed, and the waitress, whose name tag said Gwen, blushed and looked confused for a moment. Then she broke out into a wide smile. "I see that you two need to go out now." She looked straight at me. "Come back later, big boy. I finish at 6. She was nice. Lisa grabbed my hand and gave her an angry look. She dragged me outside. Her apartment was 2.5 blocks away. We walked through the main door and took the elevator up. As soon as the elevator door closed, Lisa pounced on me. She pressed me against the wall and rubbed my whole body. "This will be so great, Jim. I'll pin you to the bed." "Fine." I was breathing heavily. The elevator door opened. 2 women stood behind the door. Lisa and I exited the elevator. The women were stunned. We rushed past them. One said, "Hi, Lisa." Lisa didn't answer. The door to her apartment opened. She pulled me inside. I almost fell over the end table. Our intimate was quick but intense. I figured if I stayed with her, we'd be at it again soon, and it could have serious health consequences, at least for me. The divorce took place in the morning. Lisa and I did this all day until late at night. We ate a light meal. I suggested that we could go back to Red Lobster, but she firmly refused. She said we had soup from the refrigerator. We didn't even get dressed to eat. She looked at me after we finished the cake she had with her. "Should we talk now? Now or have intimate?" I never hesitated. I stood up, took her hand, and said, "Damn." That's what we did several more times that night. They were all fantastic. Some were slow, some were hard. She was right that I knew all her buttons, and she knew mine. At times, intimate felt like an all-out war to see who could make the other swoon. Nobody won this game, but it was a lot of fun to play. In the morning, we had intimate again, and she made breakfast. While we were eating, I decided that we needed to discuss what had happened. "Lisa, I hope we can continue like this. Divorce intimate was much better than honeymoon night." "Jim, now I know that it was a mistake for me to get married. I thought that I could keep my promise to be only yours. I tried to, but now I know that I can't do this. This obviously doesn't mean I want you out of my life. I wasn't kidding when I sang the James Taylor song, but the time will come. Lisa, I want to settle down and have children. Maybe that's part of what brought you to other guys. So I like intimate with you. You are the best. You'll probably always be the best I've ever had. I just think we could keep this up until one of us has some reason to stop. Fine, let's get on with it now." We spent the entire weekend in bed, except for short breaks to eat, shower, and use the toilet. On Saturday afternoon, there was a knock on the door. Lisa put on a robe and opened it. It was the woman who spoke to her as we were exiting the elevator. She was older, but she looked good. Lisa said, "Hi, Maisie." Maisie looked into the apartment. I was wearing gym shorts and not hiding. Lisa and I were kissing, and I was horny, even though I was covered up well. "Lisa, I haven't seen you for a while, and I just wanted to check if you were okay. Moreover, I'm doing well, Maisie, very good." Lisa smiled back at me. Maisie looked too. Maisie said, "I understand. You just keep having a good time. You're a lucky girl, Lisa. I won't worry anymore. Thank you. I'm sure we will. Lisa quietly closed the door and giggled. You gave her a good look at the product. Maybe you should have invited her for coffee. She would like it with cream. I can't let this happen. Too much cholesterol. She pulled my shorts off. On Monday, we both went to work. We haven't settled anything completely. All day I thought about what happened. I would never, ever consider any permanent relationship with Lisa. This cannot be a partnership. But as long as we had supercharged intimate, I was ready for it until I met someone I wanted to marry and have children with. Of course, you need to be very careful in this matter. Lisa taught me a hard lesson, but despite this, I wanted a family and children. I was on guard. Lisa wasn't like that. She had me and 3 other guys she slept with. We weren't married, and I didn't mind. In fact, the thought of her being such a slut even turned me on. I just got tested regularly for STDs. None of them were ever positive. Oh, and I met Maisie one day while leaving Lisa's. Maisie looked me up and down with a very significant look. She said, "Hello, maybe you remember me. I definitely remember you. You make a good tent. I really remember you, Maisie. Alice says you're divorced." "Yes, for a year and a half already. It's no fun being a single woman my age." "Maisie, you look great for any age, and you know it. Are you going to invite me in?" "I'm sure about it." "You're Tim, right?" "Yes." We went up to the 4th floor, where Maisie's apartment was across the hall from Alice's apartment. When we were at Maisie's door, Alice came out of hers. She looked at me and Maisie and started laughing. "You're a real stud, Tim. I would never have thought this about you when we were married." She looked at Maisie. "Have a wonderful time, Maisie. Tim is a top-notch stallion." She walked away with a smooth gait. Maisie was interested in Alice and me, but first she showed me the bedroom, which was tastefully furnished, at least when we walked in. Maisie was 40. She had a son in college and a daughter who worked downtown. She was good in bed, and I really enjoyed being with her. I left the next morning, promising to keep in touch. I kept that promise. It was a pleasure for me. I began to wonder what other women lived on the 4th floor, but I never found out. One day I was walking past the courthouse when a woman walking towards me stopped and asked, "We don't know each other." She looked puzzled. I remembered her, Gwen, the waitress. "You're Gwen. You were our waitress when we left our food at Red Lobster." "Oh," she blushed. "Now I remember. It's strange that I forgot, but I didn't really look at your face. You'll have to excuse me." "I'm Tim. Are you still working there?" "Part-time work. I also do modeling." She was a pretty blonde, slim, with good hips, blue eyes. "I remember that you invited me to meet you at 6, but alas, Alice and I were together all weekend." Are you guys consistent?" "No, well, on the day that we met you, we had just returned from court where our divorce was finalized. Somehow this seemed to energize us, as you saw." "Okay, this is strange. Does this still work?" "We are dating." "There's no doubt that we are compatible in some ways, not in others." She smiled at me. "Maybe you should ask me out on a date. I'm not working today." "I like your words. Can we have dinner tonight in my house? I will cook." "I look forward to it with pleasure, Tim." That evening she arrived around 6:30. She looked stunning in a short evening dress and sandals. I made us fried chicken and fried rice. We talked. She was 25 and made ends meet by working as both a model for several clothing magazines and as a waitress. She was not married, but had broken up with her long-term boyfriend about 10 months ago. At the time, I was 34 and making good money at a law firm. I had my own apartment and a good car. Alice, Maisie, and I had our own sessions. I also had a friendly relationship with a woman who worked at the courthouse maybe twice a month. But I was willing to commit, and Gwen seemed nice. I decided to have an affair with her and see where it leads. That first night, we agreed that I would take her home. She kissed me at her door. I was excited about this, but she didn't jump straight into bed. As we moved forward, I began to fall in love with her. She was pretty and smart, and I believed that she fell in love with me. On our 3rd date, we made it to bed. It was nice. I made love to her, and she seemed to appreciate it. I decided to break up with other women. One night a few weeks later, Gwen and I had just finished a rough, intimate session. We didn't always have loving intimate. She likes it rough sometimes, like me, like many people, I think. Gwen, I told you about my marriage and its problems, and now I think I'm in love with you. I stopped having intimate with other women. Glad to hear that. Since I met you, you are the only boyfriend I've had. I didn't even kiss anyone. I really love you, Tim, but I worry about your insecurities about fidelity. Will you always distrust me? Because if I say that I will only be with you, I will do so. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried, but if you promise me, I, for my part, will do everything possible to solve the problem of fidelity. Fine, deal. I will be faithful and you will be faithful too. It is suitable. 2 weeks later, I proposed. We got married 3 months later. Her parents lived in Chicago, but we held our ceremony here. It wasn't luxurious. I invited Alice and Maisie. I introduced Gwen to Alice right after I proposed. Alice was kind to her, but I could see that she was a little depressed. We weren't in love, but I knew she would miss the intimate. I would feel that way too. Gwen and I went to the Bahamas for our honeymoon. That was great. Then we moved into my apartment, and everything went very well. We immediately decided to have children, and we succeeded twice in 3 years, Thomas and Eileen. I became a partner in a firm and bought a house in a nearby suburb. I kept in touch with Alice. No, not the hot one. She married the guy from her job a year after Gwen and me. His name was Larry Gibson. He was successful, and she had a son, Lawrence, and another, Raymond. They moved to a place not far from Gwen and me. The 4 of us would meet each other in the area. Then the children went to the same play school. Gwen and Alice became friends, but Larry was very wary of me. I think he didn't trust me around Alice, and he was right. The attraction between Alice and me still existed. Gwen knew it, but she trusted me. After a while, she even trusted Alice that she would not try to get closer to me. But Larry, who could sometimes see sparks flying, never calmed down. Nevertheless, he and I had common interests, mainly baseball. We were on the same men's team in the Old Timers League, and we were both good at it. We also received season tickets to Jem's MLB games. We were both fans. Sometimes he and I went together. One day I decided to talk openly with him about my relationship with Alice before and now. We were waiting to leave the garage at Jim's park after the game. I turned to him. Larry, I want to make it very clear to you that I will never have intimate with Alice. Never again. She is married. I'm married. This won't happen. I can see that this is bothering you. God, Tim, this is a direct way to approach it. You and I could be good friends if you trusted me and Alice. But, Tim, it's obvious that you two, with your history, still have lust. To put it bluntly, I can't deny it. There is a story there. We were compatible. But I give you my word. I'm sure she told you the same thing. We need to end this if we can. Tim, I get the impression that I just see you two occasionally, like at the club dance last month. If anything, it seems like you had some amazing intimate experiences together, and you know it's annoying sometimes. I wonder who she thinks about when we have intimate. About me, or about you, or about some movie star? Do you think about her when you're with Gwen? No, but that doesn't mean I don't think about her at all. We had some good times too, maybe better times, maybe better than ever with me. That's what really worries me. Larry, I had good intimate with Alice when we were married and after, but after the divorce it was just intimate. Love is gone. She was always good at intimate, as did several others I've been with. I have good intimate with Gwen. Sometimes it's great. Alice was no better than Gwen or others, maybe just as good. It is love that makes our night special. You have it with Alice, and I have it with Gwen. Okay, I understand what you're saying. I didn't think of it that way, thank you. And that made it easier for all 4 of us to have this conversation. Of course, I lied to him. No intimate I've ever had with any woman has been as good as I had with Alice after the divorce. I'm still thinking about it, not exactly every day. And I see her, and I know that she thinks about it too. Maybe if Alice and I are both in our 80s and our spouses leave, and we're in some nursing home, maybe we'll see if we can each other to death. Thank you for watching this incredible story of betrayal and resilience. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more jaw-dropping tales. Leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments below VDJ. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, stay strong and take care. It was a cold and gray January day in Boston. The damp wind chilled me to the bone as I stood in a vacant lot, taking in my surroundings. Small pieces of charred wood and soot-stained drywall, combined with broken glass, littered the ground. Light debris swept across the site, blown by the incessant wind. I felt like this scene was an apt metaphor for what my life had become, a burnt-out, empty shell of what it once was, cold and forlorn, a monument to loneliness, bitterness, and failure. I kicked a piece of concrete and continued to think hard about what I could do with what I had left. I met Amelia at a charity fundraiser a few months after my 31st birthday. At the time, I was essentially second in command in the family retail business. My great-uncle George, the majority shareholder and CEO, told me to attend the event to raise our profile, try to make friends, and maybe attract business. The event was very boring, filled with overdramatic, narcissistic people who thought that by raising a few $1,000s to build a local library, they were on the same level as Mother Teresa. I was trying to be polite, nodding, smiling absent-mindedly, sometimes biting my tongue until it bled, and desperately hoping for a chance to leave early when she quietly sank into the seat next to me, flashed a 1,000-watt smile, and spoke as if we were old friends. Amelia was light and graceful, a slender brunette with bronze skin who exuded confidence and ease of communication. Suddenly, I didn't mind fundraising at all. I've always been a pretty headstrong, competitive guy in school, work, or sports, but I've never felt particularly comfortable in social situations. After graduating from business school, I was more or less married to my job, and this, combined with my inherent social awkwardness, made it doubly difficult to develop any experience with women. As a result of my shyness, I almost never approached a woman for a date unless I had known her for a long time. But I found Amelia irresistible, and by the end of the evening, I asked her out to dinner. We ended up having a great time, and contrary to my fears, we had a lot of common interests and a lot to talk about. I quickly fell in love with her, and the feeling was mutual. By the time I took her home, it was clear that we would be seeing each other often. We dated for a few months as the romance took off, and it wasn't long before we were seeing each other a couple of times a week and spending a fair amount of time on each date being intimate. I clearly liked her and was more than interested in getting her into bed, but I wasn't at all sure how to take the next step forward without risking painful rejection or even scaring her away forever. However, one evening, Amelia made it clear that she thought I was too slow when, instead of kissing me goodnight at the front door, she literally took matters into her own hands, unbuttoning my trousers and dragging me into the house by the one appendage that I was sure would follow her. I wasn't a virgin, but I also didn't have much experience with women, and I always thought that lustful passion was a man's activity. Amelia was very willing to disabuse me of this notion. She gave me a ride that would have made a mechanical bull seem tame, and by the time we were done, I was completely and utterly exhausted. At that moment, it was the most enjoyable thing I had ever done in my life. From that moment on, intimacy became frequent and easy, and our relationship deepened. Within a few months, we were living together, and a little more than a year after we met, we got married. We moved into a 4-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood with trees, did some landscaping, got a dog, and life was very, very good. Almost everything about marriage suited me, the end of loneliness that I did not want to admit, unconditional emotional support, the physical satisfaction of meaningful sex, having someone to love and be loved by it, was everything I wanted and more. Of course, there were some problems. I was always a little busy at work, so Amelia was a little frustrated with my availability, and there were probably a few other habits that she found a little annoying. Naturally, some things irritated me too. Perhaps the biggest challenge was that we had to interact with her family a lot more than I would have liked. Don't get me wrong, I didn't dislike her family. They were good, decent people, generally polite, and didn't have any particularly unpleasant personality traits, but I just didn't want to spend so much time with them. Her parents were an outgoing, friendly couple, and they seemed to like me, but they tended to lecture us about how we should live and put a certain amount of pressure on us to have children. But we were never around each other long enough for it to particularly annoy me, so it wasn't much of a problem. Her little sister Lisa and her husband were a little more problematic for me. Lisa was a shorter, slightly rounder version of Amelia. She dressed like Amelia, talked like Amelia, and when Amelia was around, she was never away from her for more than a few minutes. They were like virtual Siamese twins, whispering conspiratorially, laughing at inside jokes and gossiping shamelessly about friends and family. And since she and her husband lived 15 minutes away from us, we spent quite a lot of time together. There's nothing wrong with that, I suppose, and maybe it was jealousy. But when she was with Lisa, she wasn't really with me, and it was more than a little unpleasant. Lisa's husband didn't make things any better either. He was a tall, fair-haired, good-looking guy named Brian, friendly, easygoing, and in my opinion, not particularly smart. He took over his family's furniture store in Salem, and it was his favorite and sometimes only topic of conversation. He talked about the store as if it were Microsoft and he was Bill Gates, bragging about how well it was run and how no one else in the furniture business knew what they were doing. The problem with this view was that the store was struggling, and I was sure anyone who knew anything about business knew that part of the problem was Brian himself. But I wanted peace, and I wanted Amelia to be happy, which meant not causing problems with her family. So I spent more than one evening nodding my head numbly as I listened to Brian continue. We had been married almost 2 years when Amelia first asked me to help Lisa and Brian. She had prepared a fancy dinner with candles and music to set the mood and dressed in a way that promised a nice night in bed. So, as a typical newbie husband, I figured she was just interested in having a great roll in the hay with me. But as the evening went on, it became clear that she had her own plans. She continued to talk about how lucky we were to have such a large income and how she felt we were in a great position to help others. Then, with an air of practical misery, she admitted how worried she was about Lisa and Brian just getting by. It turned out that Brian owed a certain amount of money and was having difficulty making payments, and without help, he would not be able to complete his inventory list. I quickly realized where this was going and got down to business. "How much do they need, Amelia?" She paused and raised her eyebrows, letting me know that I had confused her planned presentation. She chewed her lip, thought for a minute, and then looked shyly into my eyes. "He needs $80,000. This will make them free and confident." I almost choked. Yes, we were doing well, but most of my money was tied up in a family trust, and that amount would have put a very, very big dent in our ready cash. I knew I could get the money out of the trust if I really needed it, but I didn't want to have to explain that to Greg Sanders, our chief business attorney, who also handled the trust. He would do what I asked, but I knew that for the foreseeable future, he would be fussing with me to get the money back. He wasn't cruel. He just took his job of protecting the money in the trust as well as the business very seriously. As I thought about it, it was the only time in our entire marriage that I tried to brush off Amelia's serious request. "I don't know, Amelia, that's a lot of money." She frowned. "Lisa says that he has some great ideas and that they will return the money right away. They make good money if that's what you're worried about." "I'm sure of it." Well, I wasn't sure about that. In fact, I was sure that I would flush a significant amount of money down the toilet if I sent it to Brian. But I wanted Amelia to be happy, so I went ahead and wrote out a check for $80,000, firmly telling Amelia that this meant we would have to save a little until the money comes back. I once heard advice that if you lend money to relatives, assume that you will never see them again. This sets you up emotionally so that the relationship doesn't deteriorate if they don't return the money. So, in my understanding, it was a gift, an $80,000 gift to Amelia's sister and her relatively incompetent brother-in-law, which I didn't think would solve their problem because I knew he wasn't a good enough businessman to run his own store, even with the money. I wasn't happy, but I wanted to be a good guy for her and her family. I wanted to please them, and was ready to shell out $80,000 to do it. About 6 months after I loaned Brian the money, I was at home rummaging around the house for a flash drive that had important data on it. I had a bad habit of absent-mindedly putting important things in unusual places, so I practically ransacked the entire house. After checking all the usual places, I wandered into the guest room, looked around the table, and even looked under the bed. When I stood up, I noticed that it was unusually lumpy, at least by the standards of Amelia's housekeeping, and was definitely in more disarray than I was likely to cause with my little searching. It was obvious that someone had been lying in it and had hastily pulled up the sheets and covers without making them properly. It didn't seem like a big deal to me at the time, but later that evening I accidentally mentioned it to Amelia. "Hey, did someone sleep in the guest bed? I went there recently and it was pretty unkempt." Amelia began to stutter her answer and looked flushed and nervous. Well, I took a nap there earlier. Sorry, I was cleaning, and I was so exhausted that I just jumped into bed and didn't have time to clean anything." At that point in our marriage, I trusted Amelia so much that the thought that her explanation was anything other than the honest truth did not occur to me. In fact, I remember thinking it was funny that she was nervous or embarrassed because she needed to take a nap in the middle of the day. But the blanket wasn't the only clue I missed. Over the next year or so, several more strange, inexplicable things happened that, if I hadn't stuck my head so far up my rear end, would have shown that Amelia was not a paragon of virtue. For example, I took it as gospel that her usually quiet job as an assistant manager at a small independent bookstore suddenly required her to attend 5 or 6 hour non-stop meetings every Thursday. A meeting that was so important that I shouldn't have tried to contact her during that time. I also accepted all explanations about the small bruises that appeared on her body, some of them in relatively private places, or the underwear in the wash that I did not remember her wearing. And then there was the story with orange juice. Amelia started shopping at a new high-end grocery store, which in itself wasn't much of a problem, except that she couldn't buy many of the things I liked, including my favorite brand of orange juice. I complained about this and asked her to change stores, but she insisted that the new store was better and much more convenient for her since it was right on the way home from her Thursday meetings. Her grocery shopping choices might not seem like a particularly strong indicator that she was cheating, but it was the information that made me finally stop and think, which ultimately led to the epiphany that broke my heart. Less than 18 months after the first loan, Amelia began hinting that Brian and Lisa might need more money. By that time, he had not returned even a fraction of the original $80,000, and I did not want to give additional money, especially to support an enterprise that I considered unsustainable. So I brushed off Amelia's offer, hoping she'd get the hint and stop asking. But she kept at it and suggested that Lisa and Brian might lose their business if they couldn't upgrade and get more inventory. Still trying to be Mr. Popular, I felt like I couldn't say no outright, so I finally agreed to look at Brian's business plan and tour his store to see what he wanted to do. I was hoping Amelia would back down if I at least confirmed that this was a bad investment. I met Brian at his store on a Friday morning, and with typical unbridled enthusiasm, he walked me around the store, showed me the floor plan, introduced me to the staff, smiled, and patted me on the back like we were the greatest of friends. When we stopped to talk with someone, he spoke about his business plan, and spoke with great confidence and sincerity about how he was confident that with a little more money to improve inventory and a few upgrades, the store would quickly turn a significant profit. Brian and I sat down in his office for half an hour, and I shared my doubts as diplomatically as possible. I let him know that I thought the business had some pretty deep-seated problems. I implied that unless he could optimize and cut costs and prices, he was unlikely to truly increase customer interest and revenue, even with the changes he wanted to make. I even very gently suggested that he consider selling the business and doing some other work. But he was very offended by this and repeated that he was sure that a facelift was all that was needed to improve the situation. I didn't have the heart to directly say no to his request for money, so I explained that I didn't have enough personal funds to give him a large loan and that it would have to come from a trust. I told him I would go back and talk to Greg and see if he could clear the way for the loan, but I couldn't guarantee anything. My plan was to avoid conflict, and at least make it seem like I was making a legitimate effort to get him money before delivering the bad news and essentially blaming Greg for turning him down. Cowardly, I know, but I wanted to keep peace in the family and wasn't in the mood to lose that much money. In truth, Greg would do almost anything I asked him to do, but I always impressed upon everyone I knew that he had to keep tight control of the trust, and that I could not overrule his decisions. It may seem unfair to make Greg out to be the bad guy, but to be honest, I think he enjoyed the role and never complained to me about it. At the end of the conversation, Brian nodded his head and flashed a wide, confident smile, letting me know that he felt he would get the credit. He shook my hand firmly and patted me on the back again, making me feel even more guilty as I walked away. I pulled out of the parking lot and drove down the highway, thinking about meeting Brian and trying to mentally absolve myself of the sins of cowardice and borderline dishonesty that I had just committed in his store. I was driving along, not paying much attention to my surroundings, when I saw something that at first seemed like a strange coincidence but then developed into a vague, disturbing thought. It was a grocery store, smaller than most big chains, painted green with a large Salvador's sign. It looked so unusual that I was sure that I had never seen anything like it anywhere, but for some reason the name rang a bell, and I couldn't immediately understand why. I pondered this for several minutes before it finally dawned on me. Salvador's was the name of the store Amelia started shopping at, a store that didn't stock my favorite orange juice and was much easier to get to. Only this store wasn't near her work, our house, or anywhere else it would make sense for her to be during the week. So it just didn't make any sense that this store was convenient for what she did on Thursdays. Unless, of course, she did it in a furniture store. Thinking about it, some disturbing possibilities began to appear. I made a U-turn and drove past Salvador's, then headed back to Brian's furniture store and sat in his parking lot for a few minutes. I pulled out my cell phone and checked that this was the only Salvador store in Boston, and then spent 15 or 20 minutes thinking about all the possible reasons why she might shop there. I considered the possibility that Amelia had another office in the area at work, that she might meet Lisa for lunch, that maybe she goes to a fitness club or something in the area. But my mind kept bringing me back to a conclusion I didn't want to face. Suddenly I wanted more information and decided to take the bull by the horns and meet Brian face to face. I jumped out of the car and walked briskly to the front door of the furniture store, where I noticed the clock written on the glass indicated that the store was open until 8 on weekdays, except on Fridays when they closed at noon. The cancerous suspicion that arose a few minutes ago continued to grow. Slamming the door, I entered the store and headed towards the first employee I saw, a rather awkward middle-aged man who was stirring coffee. "I'm sorry, but I'm on a break now," he interrupted irritably. "Look, I don't want to take up your time, but I need to talk to Brian Jones urgently. I have to discuss some important financial issues with him and need more information." I looked at him expectantly, but he continued to stir his coffee and even took a sip, not paying attention to my request. One of the reasons they couldn't promote the product became apparent, and I waited a moment in stunned silence before speaking again, this time in a more urgent tone. "Seriously, this is very important, so could you call him for me?" He looked at me wearily, but eventually an expression of recognition appeared on his face. "You're the guy who was here earlier with Brian, right?" "Yes, that's right. Come on in. Brian is meeting with a supplier now, but you can wait for him in the break room if you want. I don't think he'll be around for too long, maybe half an hour maximum." He walked me slowly back into the room and left me with a cup of coffee and the TV remote. I had a hastily hatched plan that involved me confronting Brian head-on and making a few bluffs about how I had hard evidence that he and Amelia were cheating. I would threaten that if he didn't confess right away, the evidence would get to Lisa and the rest of the family. I decided that if Brian cheated on her, then he would immediately spill, and if not, then I would just have to live with this shame. Maybe he'll make a joke out of it or something. I walked around the room, replaying the speech in my head, imagining how I would hint that I had photos or film or even say that Amelia had confessed. Thinking about the upcoming confrontation, I began to absent-mindedly look around the room. I scoured magazines for a bit and scrolled through a few TV channels before I decided to poke around a little for clues. It slowly dawned on me that if they were using the store to scam people, there was a very good chance it was happening in this break room, and if they were doing it here, they were almost certainly using the beat-up couch I was staring at. For a minute or two, I thought about the sofa with some anger and trepidation. It was a faded pea-green color with a couple of coffee stains and a tear in the fabric on one of the armrests. It had clearly seen better days and would probably be more at home in a junkyard or some second-hand store. I lifted the pillow, and my pulse quickened a little when I saw that it was a fold-out bed and there were sheets on it. I quickly checked that Brian was still in his office and then pulled out the bed. The sheets were a mess, full of wrinkles, with a couple of slightly darker, yellowed areas just where you'd expect a wet spot from sex. There looked to be a lipstick stain or two, and the bed smelled faintly of perfume. Opening the bed, I saw some debris on the floor under the sofa, so I reached into the space above the bed with my right hand, stretched and strained to reach the unclean carpet below, pulling up the items one at a time. In the end, I found a pen, 37 cents in change, a broken coffee cup, an empty tube of KY gel, and a receipt from a restaurant. The check was from a Mexican restaurant Amelia liked to eat at, and there was her signature there, smooth and elegant and incriminating. Even looking back, I realized that the check was just flimsy circumstantial evidence that could easily be explained away by any number of stories or excuses, but somehow finding it lifted the final fog from my thoughts, and the little unpleasant oddities about her Thursday appointment schedule, her bruises, her use of underwear, and the mess in her bed all added up to a clear picture of a cheating wife and a shitty brother-in-law. Suddenly, my plan to scare Brian into confessing seemed like a bad idea. I needed clear evidence of betrayal, and I understood that a confrontation could nullify everything or even make it impossible to prove it. But now, knowing the likely time and place of their likely betrayal, I could almost certainly gather the information, the evidence that I needed to be sure. I folded up the bed and sat on the sofa, clenching my teeth in rage, my heart pounding. I've been cheated a couple of times in business deals, and I remember being cheated at cards once. But never in my life have I felt anything remotely resembling such betrayal. I was on the verge of screaming, crying, yelling, and punching the wall all at the same time. But gradually, from this emotional whirlpool, one burning desire began to emerge, the desire to get even. I calmed down a little and began to think about my situation, trying to think as detached and unemotional as possible. I thought about the vulnerabilities of Brian and my wife and how I could exploit those weaknesses to gain some gratification for my wounded ego. When I had hard evidence, my first fantasy was to beat the crap out of Brian, but I only saw that as a prison sentence. My second thought was to refuse the loan and insist that all outstanding money be returned to me immediately, but I remembered what Greg told me once when I was considering financing from a bank that was being particularly aggressive. He advised against it, saying that if you owe someone money, especially someone who doesn't have your best interests at heart, then they have you by the balls. I wanted to take Brian by the balls. Looking back into Brian's office, I saw him standing and shaking hands with a supplier. I waved and smiled. He waved back, walked the supplier to the door, and then hurried back to the break room. "Hey, Jake, did you forget something? Do you need more information?" I shook my head and smiled. "Listen, Brian, I've thought about it, and I want to say that I may have given the wrong impression today. I really hope you understand that I think you are a great businessman, and I think you have a real opportunity to win with this store. But as I was leaving, I realized that perhaps I had expressed myself incorrectly when I asked about your plans in case things didn't go the way you wanted." He smiled back. "Oh no, Jake, I got it. Any good businessman asks difficult questions." Great. I just want to make sure you know that I really love what you're doing here. Besides, you're a family member, and I have to feel that this is not just a safe investment. It is the right decision for you as a friend and family member and as a good businessman. So I didn't want you to go home without knowing for sure that I plan to try very hard to get this money for you, and I can't imagine that we won't get it. Like I said, I don't have that much in my personal accounts, so I'll have to ask for the trust fund withdrawal. But honestly, I'm pretty sure I can get Greg to cave in, and we'll get the money for you." Brian listened with an expectant grin on his face that grew wider as I spoke. "Oh man, that sounds great. I'm telling you, this business is on the verge of taking off, so this loan is as safe with me as it is with the bank. You don't need to worry one bit." "I'm not worried at all, Brian. Greg, of course, will have to draw up some kind of agreement since he will insist on protecting the trust with collateral and such. I can get everything signed within a few days. If you have no problem with this, I think you will receive the money within a week." The next morning, I walked into Greg's office, closed the door, and plopped down in a chair. Greg was talking on the phone, making some notes, and raised one finger up, indicating that he would soon be able to speak. I was visibly fidgeting while he was ending the call, and he obviously noticed this because after hanging up, he looked at me in confusion and asked, "So, Jake, what made you so nervous this morning?" Clearing my throat, I leaned forward slightly to speak. "Greg, I think I'm going to need access to the trust to get a fairly large loan." "Yes, I think this should not be a problem. What kind of loan and how much?" He turned on the computer with his mouse and clicked a couple of icons, opening a spreadsheet that summarized the trust fund data. I cleared my throat again and leaned even closer. "Look, Greg, before we start filling out the paperwork, the first thing I want from you is absolute confidentiality." "Of course, I always—" "No, listen, I want you to understand that this is unusual, and it might be tempting to talk to George or anyone else here at work or in the family. I don't want anyone other than you and me to understand what exactly I'm trying to do here." He shifted in his chair, wrinkled his brow, and after hesitating a little began to answer, "Jake, if this is illegal?" "It's not illegal, not at all. What I really want you to do is create a document that is the pinnacle of sound legality." He shook his head and I continued, "I want to borrow some money, and I want you to draw up loan documents. I want the terms of the loan to be very clear. I want the loan to be properly collateralized by the very business for which I plan to provide it, and that the penalties for non-payment are very, very clearly stated." "It sounds like you're expecting a default. It's like you want to lure the guy into a trap." "More or less." "So who are you trying to trap and why?" I hesitated for a minute before answering and then looked him straight in the eyes. "I want to trap my brother-in-law Brian, and the reason is Amelia." He raised his eyebrows in surprise and opened his mouth several times to answer but never said a word. Finally, he drank from a glass of water standing on the table and said breathlessly, "Are you, sure about this?" "Very," I replied, "very." Within a week, the document was completed, and I personally brought it to Brian for him to review and sign. He asked his lawyer, a small muscular guy named Tim, who also happened to be his cousin, to sit down with us to review the document. "Okay," Tim began, "I looked at it last night, and it's pretty much what I expected from a business loan. But there are a couple of things I'd like to point out, Brian, before you sign." "Okay." Brian flashed his usual smile, as always agreeable and clueless as always. "Of course, give me the information." Tim cleared his throat and looked closely at Brian. I thought I caught a hint of contempt in his gaze, as if he knew how little Brian understood about running a business. "Okay, first thing, this $500,000 loan will be repaid over 7 years. You've got a pretty standard rate here. Payments will begin immediately, a little more than $7,000 per month." Brian nodded. "The actual amount you will receive will be only $420,000 since we are combining it with your loan taken out a couple of years ago. Jake will get his $80,000 back, and you will get the rest. It's clear. Understand?" "I see," Brian answered smugly with a slight Italian accent. Tim looked at him again and sighed quietly. "Okay, next. The loan is secured by collateral. It is tied to your business as well as the property above. Is this where they hunt ducks? Yes, Brian pointed to Greg while talking to Tim. They want to make sure Jake's trust is protected in case the business does go under. He winced briefly and then quickly added, but that won't happen. Business is in great shape. I think so, and Greg Sanders seems to think so. He nodded at me and smiled. And Jake definitely thinks so, right, Jake? Oh, yes, I replied with as much enthusiasm as possible. Brian showed me the books, and I think he has a winner here. I smiled. But, well, I don't know if you know Greg or not, but he's very, very conservative and always considers the worst-case scenario. He wants to be absolutely sure that the trust is protected, so it is important to him that if for some impossible reason the business fails, there is something to reimburse the trust. Tim frowned and then glared at Brian. Do you understand that if you default, you may well lose the business, transferred to the trust, maybe even the land for duck hunting? Certainly. Brian spoke seriously, perhaps trying to convey to Tim that he understood the warning and took it very seriously. I understand the consequences, but honestly, I'm very confident in the business, and I think it's much safer to take out this loan than to try to run the business without it. Do you understand that already 3 months after an insufficient payment, fines begin to accrue, right? I certainly understand. He smiled at me as if we shared some secret, as if he understood that I would never allow Greg to impose punitive damages for anything but the most egregious violations. I simply smiled back. At home, Amelia was overjoyed. She went on and on about how well Brian's business would do now that he had enough money to solve his major problems. Somehow, I managed not to blurt out what I really wanted to say, namely that the main problem is Brian himself, and no amount of money will solve it. But over the next few weeks, keeping my mouth shut about Brian's business acumen was the easiest thing I had to do when I was around Amelia. I needed more information before I could end my marriage the way I wanted, and it would take a little time. So I knew that I would have to control my emotions, which swayed daily from melancholy to rage and disgust when I thought about her betrayal. Having dinner with her without exploding became a challenge, and intimacy became something to be avoided if possible. And when I had no way out, I was forced to rely on memories of a rather dirty sexual encounter many years ago. When I was 19, my friends and I went to Miami for spring break. One night, we found ourselves in a seedy bar to blow off some steam. We drank, watched some pretty explicit and frankly gut-wrenching sex shows, and ended up with a few prostitutes. Somehow, I ended up paired with a woman in her 30s who had obviously lived a pretty hard life. She was not particularly attractive and perhaps even worse than I remember, given that my ideas of aesthetic beauty were undoubtedly impaired by a rather high blood alcohol level. But even in this state, I had serious doubts about taking her to bed and began to come up with excuses trying to get out. But my friends taunted me, questioning my masculinity, my sexual orientation, and all that jazz. Feeling like I had no choice, I put on a fake smile, quickly downed a couple more drinks, gritted my teeth, and followed her into the damp, unkempt private room above the bar to get down to business. Now, in order to get the job done, so to speak, I found that I had to pretend that she wasn't there, that she was just some kind of sexual device. I ended up using her like a piece of meat, having her and enjoying her despite the noise from the bar, the claustrophobic room, the dirty sheets, and the bad smells she gave off. So over the next few weeks, when I had intimacy with Amelia, she became that prostitute in my imagination again. I closed my eyes, held my emotional nose, and had her like I had that poor woman all those years ago. Nothing tender, no affection, just a biological function. Once I started, it became almost too easy to have her as hard and fast as I could. I was very brutal with my technique. Unsurprisingly, Amelia noticed the changes and eventually mentioned it. She complained that she wished she could at least have some gentle, romantic intimacy when we got into bed, but overall, she didn't seem to mind having it the way we did, and considered it on the whole an improvement compared to the intimacy we had had up to that point. I think in another life she would have made good money from American tourists in Miami. Obtaining irrefutable evidence of an affair turned out to be about as easy as I thought. Brian used some of the money to remodel the store itself a bit, and throughout the day there were quite a few workers wandering around doing some repairs. I guessed correctly that without anyone noticing, the electrician who had $500 of my money in his back pocket would place a camera and recording device in one of the light fixtures on a Friday morning, a month or so after Brian received the money, above the sofa in the lounge room. In 2 days, he would clean everything up. I now had a pretty good idea of what Brian and Amelia were up to, so I figured I was prepared for what I'd see from the camera. I decided that I would sit in my office at work with a drink and some chips and take it all in as dispassionately as possible, as if I were watching a movie. It turns out that seeing your wife being intimate with another guy is much worse than just realizing it's happening, much, much worse. By the end of the recording, I had drunk so much scotch that I couldn't get home, trashed my desk, puked twice, and threw a paperweight at my office door. The details are basically what you'd expect. I went to the beginning of the day on Thursday and began to look there at a fast speed until I saw the figure of a woman in a blue dress with a large shopping bag enter the room, take fresh sheets from the bag and lay them out on the sofa. I immediately slowed the recording down to normal speed and saw, with a feeling of grim confirmation, that the woman was indeed Amelia. After changing the sheets, she opened the bag again and took out a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. She took off her blue dress, folded it neatly, and put it in her bag, and then waited, wearing thigh-high stockings, French-cut panties, and a very revealing bra, reading a novel while sitting on the edge of the bed. It felt strangely surreal, reminding me a little of a strange performance art exhibition I once saw in New York, where a scantily clad young woman was reading strange New Age poetry to an audience who were more concerned with her breasts than with the poetry. When Brian finally entered the room, Amelia put her book down, smiled, and stood up to hug him. Then she pushed him away slightly, reproaching him for making her wait for his arrival. He replied that her problem was that she could never wait for him to come, and they both chuckled at the old joke. They kissed for a few minutes, and then Amelia reached for his belt, unbuttoned his pants, and pulled them down around his ankles along with his underwear. The intimacy I saw was not mind-blowing. I got the feeling that this was their routine, as they silently changed, each anticipating what the next step would be. The act wasn't interesting. He had it hard, using a constant rhythm like a metronome, which I would have found boring if I hadn't felt outraged. Around the 10-minute mark, Brian climaxed, and I got the feeling that Amelia was doing the same from the way she suddenly stretched out her legs and threw her head back. They lay there in silence for a few moments until he rolled onto his side and they began to kiss. By the time they finally finished, I was so hurt and furious that I knew the pictures I had seen were imprinted on my consciousness, like an indelible scar that would never be erased. And accordingly, I would not allow myself to forgive either of these 2 traitors. I was glad that I had a plan to end, not save, my marriage. As I leaned forward to turn off the video, I noticed they started talking in bed. Amelia lay on her side, head raised, resting her right hand on her bent right elbow and lazily drawing patterns on the chest of Brian lying on his back. They looked at each other, whispered quietly, and smiled with satisfaction. Amelia began to quietly complain about having to use the furniture store as her love nest. Brian turned on his side and answered, "Come on, Amelia. If we use the hotel, we'll definitely leave marks, and we almost got caught using one of our houses. We really have no choice." Amelia shrugged. I know, but I really wish we had another place to play. I just don't like this room, and changing last week's dirty sheets for making love doesn't exactly excite me." Brian reached out and stroked her cheek, smiling. "Well, we could always just run away together." Amelia laughed in response, and Brian's expression turned thoughtful, his smile fading a little. "Seriously, Amelia, have you ever regretted marrying Jake? I mean, I love Lisa, and she's a good wife, but sometimes I don't know if you think that it would be better if maybe, instead of them, you and I got married." Amelia sat up on the bed so that she was essentially sitting with her back against the back of the sofa, her arms wrapped around her knees, which were pulled up to her chest. She looked at Brian thoughtfully before answering, "Come on, Brian. How many times should we repeat this? What we have is special, very special. But no, I don't think it would be better if we got married. Of course, we would be very happy together. But I also love Jake, and you love Lisa. If you and I were together, it would be just us. Jake is a very monogamous guy, and he would never pursue a relationship with me if I were married, and I don't think Lisa would be very happy with that either." She leaned over and kissed Brian on the cheek, rubbing his chest with her left hand. "The truth is, Brian, people like you and me have a great gift of love. We can love more than one person at a time, and we must love more than one person. This is right for us, but Lisa and Jake are not like that. Their self-restraint tendencies mean that they will never be able to do what you and I do. They will never be able to keep their emotions in check and make everyone happy." Hearing this, my indignation reached its peak, and that's when I sent my paperweight through the office door. Because I loved her, or maybe because she was the only woman who ever loved me. I never realized how arrogant, delusional, and narcissistic my wife was. In her mind, she somehow turned her infidelities into some kind of virtue. For her, obviously, this was not an act that presented a stab in the back of her lawful husband, but rather something that increased the love in the world, something she not only had a right to, but also a moral imperative. I slept on the couch in my office that night and completed all the necessary paperwork the next morning. When I returned home the next evening, Amelia greeted me with her hands on her hips and a sour expression on her face. "Where the hell were you last night? I was terribly worried. You didn't call, you didn't write, you didn't give me the slightest idea what the hell." I stopped her with a raised hand. "Yesterday evening I was at work. I got drunk and couldn't go home, so I stayed there." She looked at me with complete bewilderment. "Wait, what? You got drunk at work?" I smiled and nodded back at her, and she continued, "Well, at least you could let me know what's going on. I almost called the police. And why the hell were you drinking at work?" She was still looking at me, but there was utter bewilderment in her question. Without answering, I walked past her into the living room, sat down on the sofa, put my feet on the coffee table, took the briefcase on my lap, and opened it. Amelia let out an indignant sigh as she followed me into the living room and angrily sat down in the chair opposite the sofa. "Hey, how about some answers, Jake? Why did you drink so much at work? What happened last night? What's happening?" I continued rummaging through my case and pulled out a couple of folders, placing them one by one on the couch next to me. "Just a second, Amelia. I want to tidy things up a little." I sorted the papers a little more, took my legs off the table, replaced them with papers, and leaned forward. I rubbed my hands together as if anticipating a sumptuous meal, looked at Amelia, and smiled. "Okay then, let's get started." "What? Let's begin? With what?" "Yeah, well, after what happened last night." "Last night? What happened last night?" Amelia's aggressive attitude quickly gave way to something more passive when I got home. I began to sense her slight fear. "Can you at least tell me what you did last night?" "Oh yeah, I watched the video." "Video? What video?" "Yeah, I saw the video of you and Brian having sex on that couch in the lounge, and I thought it was a little disturbing. So maybe I went a little overboard, you understand?" I smiled thinly, emotionlessly at Amelia, whose face went from bewilderment to shock to fear and confusion. Her mouth was half open, making small, spasmodic movements, barely opening and closing, unable to utter a single meaningful sound. Her eyes, wet and increasingly wet, darted back and forth from the papers on the table to the door and to me as if she was expecting someone or something to come through the door, put the papers away, and everything would get better. Finally, she spoke. I don't understand, Jake. What are you talking about?" "Come on, Amelia, you can't be that stupid. I'm talking about you and Brian and what you two did yesterday and every other damn Thursday for a year." I gestured to the papers lying in front of me. "I'm talking about the end of our marriage." Amelia gasped suddenly and covered her mouth. For a moment, I waited for her to answer. "Jake, we can work things out. I think I can make you understand. Oh, I think I understand, Amelia. I took a DVD out of my briefcase, held it in my hands, and then pushed it across the table towards her. Last night I received all kinds of information to help me understand Indeed, a veritable gold mine of new facts about my loving wife and my friendly brother-in-law. She stared at the DVD like she was looking at a poisonous snake, physically recoiling slightly but making no effort to grasp it. Come on, Amelia, this is your copy. I won't tell you how I got it, but I have my own for future reference and to further teach your philosophy of love and devotion. She leaned forward and started to stand up, and for a moment it looked like she was going to come towards me, but I raised my hand and stopped her, and she sat down. She bit her lip for a second and then, looking straight at me, spoke again slowly and deliberately with a kind of false confidence that I suspect was meant to hide the trembling in her voice. Jake, listen, you have to open your mind and think about this. There is no point for you to destroy your life, our lives, because we have different values and talents. I love you and have always been willing to accommodate our differences, and I hope that— I interrupted her with a mock snort. Different values and talents? Seriously? Do you think cheating on your husband is some kind of talent? Because honestly, Amelia, I'm sure everyone is capable of this. Seriously, talent is not the right word. She took a deep breath and looked at the ceiling for a moment, and then back at me. Ability. I think the right word is ability. I have greater capacity to love, and I can and have successfully loved more than one person at a time. Apart from outdated ideas about love and relationships, there are no reasons in which I cannot or should not use my ability. Please just stop. Honestly, you're just annoying me with your excuses. I understand that you think that you have some special ability that gives you the right to deceive, lie, and cheat when you should be faithful. But really, that's just BS. Anyone can be romantically involved with multiple people at the same time. This does not make them lovers with great ability, it just makes them cheaters. In the blink of an eye, the apologetic, conciliatory Amelia was gone, replaced by an angry, aggressive, extremely self-confident vixen. Are you calling me a cheater? She attacked me. Well, fair enough. From your point of view, it probably is. But then again, I never lost or suppressed my love for you or my love for Brian. So I never betrayed my emotions, never compromised my feelings for my actions because of some medieval code that says I must limit my relationships to one person and one person only. So yes, I may look like a cheater to you, but when I look in the mirror, I have no problems with what I see, no doubts about what I did. None. She was breathing heavily and passionately. Her face and chest were flushed. There was a fire in her eyes, a look that made me challenge her. And what about you, Jake? Do you want to live like this? Some kind of open relationship with lots of different guys? Loving one guy one day and another the next? Yes, please, to each his own. But pretending that you didn't cheat, that you weren't dishonest, is complete BS because you never told me you were having sex with Brian, and you know full well that I wouldn't do that. You know it. She felt my fire and turned away from me slightly, avoiding my gaze, but I turned so that my eyes rested on hers and then continued. So you decided to lie by omission, the greatest BS omission of truth I have ever personally encountered. You made me and practically everyone else think that we were a couple committed solely to each other. But you went and started or continued to have Brian, hiding your cheap adventures in the furniture store as best you could. You've told lies, lived a lie. No matter what the hell you have, a weird family philosophy that makes you a cheater. By this time, she had angry tears running down her cheek, and her mouth was tightly clenched, more angry than sad, slowly shaking her head in disagreement with what I said, but apparently having no words to back up her feelings. I continued to look at her, waiting for an answer, but when nothing came, I broke this confrontation by moving the papers closer to her. Read it. Find a lawyer. This is true. Finally, she spoke. What if I don't want a divorce? Then you're out of luck, Amelia, because you're going to get it. I paused for a moment, and with a poorly concealed grin added, but hey, that doesn't mean you'll be alone. I moved out that evening. moving into an apartment closer to work and quickly returning to who I was before Amelia, a worker, a businessman, a loner who had neither the time nor the desire to engage in social activities. The hours I spent at work became simply hellish, and more than one person noticed this, but I knew that if I sat at home, I would just obsess over Amelia, endlessly repeating her affair in my mind, wondering if she was thinking about me or if she was currently having sex with Brian. I really had no choice but to throw myself into work as hard as I could and try to forget about my marriage as quickly as possible. My normal inclination in any type of competition is to do whatever it takes to win, and I believe that most people who knew me in the business world would expect long, drawn-out, aggressive negotiations to reach an agreement. But it would have meant delay, interaction, and pain, and I was willing to pay to get out of the case quickly and cleanly. I offered Amelia a large lump sum in exchange for continued support, with the threat of withdrawing the offer if she did not agree to a quick divorce. Deep down, I guess I wanted her to object, to insist that we could somehow make the marriage work, to refuse the proposal, and to fight for the marriage. I wanted what little chance of survival she thought our marriage had to be more important to her than money. It turned out that this was not the case. With some half-serious objections, she agreed to the terms, and within 60 days, my marriage was over. A couple of months after the divorce was finalized, Brian quite predictably began to fall behind on payments. He received appropriate warnings and an unpleasant letter from Greg, in which he was informed that we would begin to take the money in any way we could. He called and emailed with excuses and promises, practically begging for more time to pay. I instructed Greg to play hardball, and we made it clear that we would exercise our rights and begin pursuing bail as soon as legally possible. On the eve of the detention, Brian begged to meet with me in person, and I agreed. At that moment, I realized that he was desperate and was ready to do anything or take money from anyone to save himself from the wolves. I wanted the money to come from Amelia. I was looking forward to the meeting. We met in my office after work. Most of the secretaries had gone home, but my personal assistant, Cheryl, remained in the outer office, ready to prepare paperwork if needed. Brian looked more nervous than I'd ever seen him and held out his hand, dripping with sweat, for me to shake as he walked hesitantly into my office. Behind him, almost timidly, stood Amelia, and I found it difficult to catch my breath when I saw her. Amelia sat closer to me than Brian. She was wearing one of my favorite outfits, fully made up and flashing her fiery smile. I had no doubt that she was here to try to improve Brian's chances by reaching out to my emotional connections. I suddenly felt an almost irresistible impulse to rush to her, grab her in my arms and kiss her. But realizing the danger of my feelings, I ruthlessly suppressed this impulse, drawing a gloomy expression on my face and muttering some kind of greeting in reluctant recognition of her presence. To tell the truth, I was more than surprised that she came at all. I had been looking forward to this meeting for a long time and had carefully planned how it would go, but I had not expected Amelia to be there, and I was worried that her presence would somehow interfere with my plan to associate her with the failures of her lover. I thought about objecting, maybe insisting that she waited outside, but ultimately decided that her presence might make the outcome more pleasant. Brian started by trying to charm me. After shaking my hand, he smiled as wide as he could and started making small talk about how he wanted to try to make things right, wanted me to be happy, and hoped I knew how much he respected me, and that he was really sorry that it all turned out this way. I was shocked that he seemed to want to renew the friendship, that he thought we could be buddies again. I didn't buy it. Without the slightest hint of a smile, I stared at him and stopped his little speech as unemotionally as possible. "Brian, please stop this crap. Your apology is meaningless to me, okay?" He swayed in his chair, looking as if I had hit him. Then he pursed his lips, took a deep, worried breath through his nose, and nodded his head in agreement before starting again. "Okay, sorry, Jake. Let's get down to business." He looked at me as if this was my meeting, as if he thought I should continue, but I simply held my arms out in an expectant gesture and waited for him to state his case. He licked his lips nervously, and ran a trembling hand through his hair before going on about how he had every intention of returning the money, but was a little short on funds at the moment. He talked about how Greg played hardball and doubted I knew how hard he was pressuring him to pay. He then went on to say that the business was on the brink of recovery and that with a little time he would be able to get his head above water. Finally, he ended up trying to prove that I would be in a better financial situation if I gave him more time. I leaned back in my chair slowly, carefully studying Brian's nervous smile, the thin film of sweat that formed on his forehead, and the poorly controlled trembling of his right hand as it lay on the table between us. "Brian, if you weren't an outright deceiver, I would consider giving you a reprieve." His eyes went wide with surprise and distress, and he leaned forward about to protest when I stopped him with a raised hand. "Come on, Brian. You have to understand that it's almost impossible to trust a man who hasn't given a second thought to screwing his married sister-in-law. You should know that asking the same woman's ex-husband for financial help is simply ridiculous." Brian shifted uncomfortably in his seat while Amelia nervously cleared her throat and spoke in a plaintive voice. "Jake, please. You can't punish Brian just because—" "I can do whatever the hell I want, Amelia," I snapped, giving her a look of pure hostility. "Why are you here anyway?" "I thought maybe I could talk you into it for old time's sake. I'm still worried about you, and I thought that—" I interrupted her sharply and loudly. "You thought wrong. Honestly, your presence just reminds me of how Brian figuratively screwed me by literally screwing you. So do yourself and Brian a favor and sit back, try to look nice, and keep comments to an absolute minimum." There were tears in her eyes and her chin began to wrinkle, but she did what I insisted and calmly sat back in her chair. I turned back to Brian. "Okay, Brian, here's how it will be. You will repay the debt on time according to our schedule, or I will begin the foreclosure process to get everything I can from the collateral." Brian shook his head aggressively. "Come on, Jake. You can't take my business away from me. You cannot." "I can and I will if you don't pay, Brian. My advice is to get money. Reach out to your family, find a bank, sell something. I don't care. Just get the money or I'll take whatever I can get." But you know that banks don't give me loans. Otherwise, I would have turned to them first. And my family can't help. They don't have that kind of money." I looked Brian straight in the eyes. "Don't tell me all this nonsense about how your family doesn't have money. I know they do." No, they would help if they could, but they just can't." "What about her?" I pointed my finger at Amelia. "Did you ask her for money?" Brian sat back down. "Amelia doesn't—" I laughed. "Of course she has. I wrote her a check for $150,000. She has plenty of money." "Really, Amelia?" I looked at Amelia with a smirk, and Brian looked at her with a question on his face. As I suspected, he did not know about the lump sum payment. She suddenly felt nervous, perhaps a little nauseous. "Well, yes, I have it, but I need this money." I laughed again. "Stop, Amelia. I remember how safe you thought it was to give money to Brian when you talked me into helping in the first place. Why are you hesitating now? Aren't you confident that Brian can get his business back on track? Don't you want to help convince me that he's good for the money? If you think this is a good investment for me, then why not for you?" I gave her an expectant, evil grin. She swallowed hard, looked at Brian for a second, and then back at me. Taking a deep breath, she squared her shoulders and said in a vaguely defiant tone that she could make up the difference for a while. Brian smiled at her, she smiled back weakly, and they walked away. Brian walked with more confidence, and Amelia walked with disappointment as I held the door open for them. I left them with one last instruction. "Remember, Brian, I don't care how. I just need the money." "You will get your money," he spat back at me. Amelia looked worried. Over the next few months, I continued to try to find solace in my work. Businesslike and efficient with everyone, I continued to avoid any personal conversations at all costs, completely refusing any social opportunities, preferring instead to work or be alone. I tried desperately not to think about my wife's betrayal and Brian's betrayal, but everything reminded me of them. Even, of course, the monthly check from Brian that was lying on my desk. The check brought some kind of bitter satisfaction, the feeling that, to some extent, I was able to plunge the authors of my misfortune into poverty. Things got a little worse when Lisa contacted me. She emailed me several times and even called me on the phone. I was quite surprised to learn that Brian and Amelia had confessed to her, no doubt, a softened version of their affair, and that she had taken it rather hard at first, but had eventually forgiven them both. To my disappointment and horror, she vaguely hinted that she guessed that they were lovers, and that they had come to some kind of agreement in which Brian and Amelia continued to see each other. She even made a half-serious attempt to convince me to consider getting Amelia back. My responses were bitter and harsh, and I was sure that by the end of the second call, I had left her in tears, after which I never heard from her again. Lisa's obvious tolerance made it clear that the emotional price Brian and Amelia paid was far less than I had hoped. Now I was very afraid that somehow the story would become solvent, that Brian would pay off his debt, that he would pay off Amelia, and that they would all be satisfied with the outcome, both financially and emotionally, that they would leave me behind, shaking their heads at the poor soul who just couldn't understand what modern love was. I shouldn't have worried. The furniture showroom burned down 11 months after I met Brian and Amelia. It was a spectacular two-alarm fire that threatened several nearby buildings and made the nightly news. I didn't see the plot, but Greg did, and he called me immediately to discuss the implications. He was angry at me for taking such a risk because he was sure that the trust had flushed quite a large amount of money down the toilet. I reassured him by promising to personally buy the loan if he defaulted, assuring him that the property itself was worth something simply because of its location. Obvious questions were asked about the fire, and when catalysts were discovered, the insurance company immediately refused to pay. With no income from the store, Brian defaulted on the loan, and I purchased the smoking ruins of the property and 35 acres of duck hunting land. The criminal investigation lasted almost 6 months. The detectives put together a pretty good circumstantial case against Brian and Amelia. They were able to prove that the store was losing money, and Amelia was shelling out more and more money every month to keep it afloat. Brian made several desperate attempts to obtain loans from other sources, failed, and then as quietly as possible made a last-ditch attempt to sell the business. But there were no buyers even at a greatly reduced price. Investigators could find no evidence that Amelia or Brian were near the store on the night of the fire, or that they purchased anything to start or precipitate it, but their case was built on the theory that they hired a professional to set the store on fire. They found numerous searches containing the term arson on Amelia's home computer, phone records showing communications with at least 2 men with arson convictions, and noted that she had withdrawn $20,000 in cash the week before the fire. Amelia and Brian had a pretty good lawyer, no doubt bought with whatever money she had left, and the DA knew he was going to have a fight, so he started making deals. I'm guessing they started with first-degree arson and fraud charges and then went from there. The defense wouldn't settle for anything less than fourth-degree arson, so a game of tag began to set a trial date. I was on the witness list, waiting in the lobby outside on the first day of the trial, sitting on the hard wooden bench, reading the newspaper and absent-mindedly tapping my foot on the tile floor, when a court official came out and announced that the trial was canceled, that they had finally made a deal, and that we could all go home. As I was gathering my things to leave, Amelia and Brian walked in from the hall, accompanied by several officers and their lawyer. Several reporters jumped up and shoved microphones under their noses, but they declined to comment, and the reporters turned to their lawyer. Brian met with Lisa and walked out of the foyer with several officers, but Amelia looked my way and didn't hesitate to approach me to talk. I must admit that I admired her courage to face me under such circumstances. "Well, Jake, is this your lucky day? Is this what you wanted, for me to be punished for my sins?" I laughed bitterly and shook my head mockingly. "I wanted to have a faithful wife and a successful marriage. I'll never get what I want from you. Absent that, I just want my money." She snorted. "Well, you're not getting any of this now, are you?" "Oh, I got some of this back and I have a store." She laughed. "And what are you going to do about it? Has it stopped smoking yet?" You'd be surprised what a smart businessman can do with a good piece of property, even a smoking one." Her nostrils flared and her face hardened a little. She took a deep breath and paused before speaking again. "And now you are happier alone, without anyone, married to your job for the foreseeable future." She gave me a knowing smirk. "Don't deny it, I know you. I know how much you hate meeting new people." "I'm working on it, Amelia. I loved you, but you are not the only woman in the world." She smiled confidently. "No, not the only one. But I don't think you can find, what do you businessmen call it, an equivalent replacement. Whether you like it or not, you will miss me." I leaned towards her and whispered in her ear, "I might be a little lonely, but you won't be, will you? The good news is that you'll be sharing a cramped space with a bunch of pretty, androgynous women with whom you can share all that abundant love you have. This will be beneficial for both you and the lesbians." Amelia surprised me by suddenly losing her composure at my last remark, recoiling from me as if I were radioactive. Her face a mask of contempt and her eyes flashing with anger, she took a deep breath, her chest heaving aggressively a couple of times, and then she exploded. "You self-righteous, sanctimonious, emotionally damaged bastard!" she screamed as the officers dragged her away from me and toward the door. "You will be in the same hole as me, alone, without anyone, married to my damn slave." As I watched her scream at me, her love for me completely evaporated, leaving only contemptuous hatred. I was overcome by a sudden wave of melancholy. I resisted the urge to react in a way that would reveal my pain, smiled thinly and muttered some quips about her public use of rather offensive language, but she just continued her diatribe as if I hadn't said anything. But very little time will pass, and I will leave my prison and move on with my life, and you will remain alone, wanting to be with me, and then many years from now, when you're married to some boring ex-secretary, you'll still regret not agreeing. The door closed behind her, abruptly ending the rest of her tirade. I turned and walked out of the courtroom. My day was cleared of judgment, and now, without any meetings or conferences, struggling with a growing sense of despondency and loneliness, I went to the burnt site and thought about my life. The temperature dropped, and the wind continued to whip my jacket and sting my face as I looked around, still wondering what I could do with the wreckage. I wasn't sure if I could even save the situation, and my main desire was to sell everything, forget about the loss, and focus on what I had always done. It was safe, perhaps even smart, but I knew there was another option. I could take a risk and rebuild, maybe even open another furniture store. I was thinking about the possibility of successfully selling furniture from the same place where Brian failed. I was thinking about making a big deal out of it with lots of advertising, billboards, maybe even TV commercials, something that Brian and my ex couldn't miss. I could even call it Amelia's and have lots of last-minute sales. It struck me that the decisions I would make regarding the site were similar to those I had unconsciously made regarding my life in general. Amelia was right about me. My natural inclination, in fact, my only social inclination before meeting her, was to withdraw, avoid the risk of intimacy, and focus on work. I saw myself inexorably approaching a life of loneliness, a financially secure but relatively joyless existence. I again became what suited me, doing something safe. Sitting down on the concrete block, I looked around again, still weighing my options, still contemplating my future. I was stuck between my fears and desires, the ingrained habits that served and defined me, and the desire to change, to be different. I was about to leave and go back to work, let things slide, and put off the decision for another day, when a few rays of late-afternoon sun filtered through the clouds and between the buildings, illuminating the graffiti-covered wall across the street. The light cast a burning orange glow on the wall, giving the concrete and lettering an incandescent quality. The words were written in bold white letters, clear and easy to read. Take action. I have always been disdainful of superstitious people and the way they allow meaningless, objectively irrelevant things to rule their lives as signs or habits. But here, sitting on a concrete slab in the January cold, these words seemed to me like fate, a message from God. I took out my cell phone and called the office, calling my assistant. Hey, Cheryl, who's the architecture firm that designed the new shopping center that's getting all the press? The one with glass and fountains? Hummer, something like that, I think? She chuckled lightly to herself for a couple of moments while she checked. Yes, Hammerstone. Looks like they're based here in Boston. Okay, listen, could you arrange a meeting with me as soon as possible? She hesitated for a second. Are we, building something? I looked around the area, mentally imagining the new store, and suddenly felt a surge of confidence. Yes, I think we are. Okay, sure, boss. Anything else? I chewed my lip for a second as my eyes fell on the graffiti on the opposite side of the street again, reading the imperative again. Act. Yes, Cheryl, there is one more thing. Do you remember that representative in the counterfeit jeans, the tall blonde, Brenda White, I think? Yes. Cheryl's voice became increasingly incredulous, and I wondered if she thought I was having some sort of breakdown. Can you give me her number? Of course, boss. Do you want me to connect it? No, I'll call myself. Thank you. I dialed Brenda's number, my mind racing with possibilities. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Hello, this is Brenda White, she answered. Hi, Brenda, it's Jake, I said, trying to sound as casual as possible. Oh, Jake, it's great to hear from you. How have you been? Not too bad, Brenda. Listen, I was wondering if you'd like to grab dinner sometime this week. There's something I'd like to discuss with you. There was a brief pause before she responded. Sure, Jake, that sounds great. How about Thursday evening? Perfect. I'll make a reservation and text you the details. See you then. See you, Jake. I hung up the phone, feeling a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. Reaching out to Brenda was a step towards something new, a chance to break free from the past and create a different future. I spent the next few days preparing for the meeting with the architects, formulating ideas for the new store, and looking forward to dinner with Brenda. Thursday evening arrived quickly. I chose a nice, quiet restaurant where we could talk without distractions. Brenda arrived right on time, looking as radiant as ever. We exchanged pleasantries and ordered our meals before diving into conversation. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you found my story of betrayal, rebuilding, and finding new love as compelling as I did living through it. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Deceived Husbands for more real-life stories of heartbreak and resilience. And remember, no matter how tough things get, there's always a way to rebuild and find happiness again. Stay strong, and I'll see you in the next video. Jake, you mentioned wanting to discuss something with me, Brenda said, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. Yes, Brenda. I've been thinking about expanding my business, and I could use your expertise. I want to rebuild the furniture store that burned down and make it something special. I need someone with your experience to help me navigate this new venture. Brenda smiled warmly. I'd love to help, Jake. Your vision sounds exciting, and I think we could create something amazing together. We spent the rest of the evening discussing ideas, plans, and possibilities. By the end of the night, I felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. Brenda's enthusiasm was infectious, and I knew I had made the right decision in reaching out to her. Over the next few months, we worked closely together, planning and designing the new store. The process was challenging but rewarding, and I found myself enjoying the collaboration more than I had anticipated. Brenda's insights and creativity were invaluable, and our professional relationship quickly developed into a genuine friendship. As the construction of the new store progressed, I also started to rebuild my personal life. I began attending social events, meeting new people, and slowly opening up to the possibility of new relationships. Brenda and I continued to spend time together outside of work, and I realized that my feelings for her were growing stronger. One evening, after a particularly successful meeting with the construction team, Brenda and I decided to celebrate with dinner at a nearby restaurant. As we talked and laughed, I felt a connection with her that I hadn't felt with anyone in a long time. Brenda, I have to be honest with you, I said, taking a deep breath. I've really enjoyed working with you, and our time together has meant a lot to me. I think I have feelings for you, and I hope that's okay. Brenda reached across the table and took my hand. Jake, I've felt the same way for a while now. I was just waiting for the right moment to tell you." We spent the rest of the evening talking about our feelings and the future. It felt good to be honest and open, and I knew that I was finally moving forward. As the new store neared completion, Brenda and I grew closer, both professionally and personally. We made a great team, and our relationship blossomed into something beautiful. The grand opening of the store was a huge success, and I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that I hadn't felt in years. With Brenda by my side, I knew that I could face whatever challenges came my way. I had learned from my past mistakes, and I was determined to build a future filled with love, trust, and happiness. The memory of Amelia and Brian's betrayal still lingered, but it no longer had the power to control my life. I had taken action, rebuilt my business, and found love again. I was finally free.